Central, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, ISO 27000, A Day in the Life of an Audit Deeper Dive. This webinar will be recorded. We will also have question and answer at the end, so please use the chat feature for that and feel free to submit them throughout the presentation. Our presenters today are Sandeep Podar and Laura Flanagan. Sandeep, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Good morning all, and welcome to this DQS webinar. Today we will take a deeper dive into an ISO 27001 audit to look at the clauses, Annex A controls, and follow a few audit paths. Let's review our webinar agenda. As you have read in the registration materials, the focus of this webinar is to provide an understanding of how an ISMS audit is conducted. We will look at the overview of ISMS with respect to ISO 27001, clauses and Annex A controls, followed by a few examples relating to an organization's network and the cross-functional controls. Then we will look at how we set up an agenda of the audit that is shared with clients. We will look at a few audit path examples and also how the audit of top management can be conducted, how the client's compliance team may prepare their top management for the interview during the audit by providing relevant information to them. And then we will conclude with the valuable information on DQS website and how to connect with DQS for all of your certification needs. Let's begin with an overview of ISO 27001. ISO 27001 follows a harmonized approach similar to other management systems such as ISO 9001, ISO 14001. From the top of the house, we begin with clause 4, the context of the organization, understanding all of the interested parties, their needs and expectations. Then clause 5, leadership and commitment. Without all levels of management engaged, there can be no management system. They are required to be accountable and ensure that the team has everything it needs to be successful. From there on, the Plan, Do, Check, Act or PDCA cycle begins. Planning or clause 6 includes risk assessment, treatment, and objectives, while operations, clause 8, carries out those activities to deliver the controls and objectives. In performance evaluation or clause 9, we take a step back from the process and review what is working and what is not working. And clause 10, improvement, the continuous improvement and corrective actions to keep your ISMS healthy. Rogue actors don't do something just once and then set it on the shelf. Neither can we. This is a continuous effort. Finally, support or clause 7 kind of binds everything together. Hence the foundation, the resources, competency, awareness, communication, and documented information. If you look at the heart is the Annex A controls. Annex A has 14 security domains. They are all listed here. Some are more technical in nature, some more administrative, many are both. Now, this next section will focus on the network perspective. This is a busy slide, but it provides high-level view of the network and the risks that may be associated with the controls listed within Annex A of ISO 27001. As you can see, a simplified example of a network diagram is in the upper right of the slide. while along the left we can see users, whether IT workers, employees, contractors, or suppliers accessing the network, which may be within the physical confines of the organization, or they may be working remotely. As we look around at the access points, different controls are listed that may be impacted by the relevant activities. So for example, for your employees, contractors, or suppliers, anyone given access to the network or assets, they would require training, and they must comply with all policies including acceptable use, clear desk, clear screen policies, and understand what to do in the event of an incident. All at the same time, when your IT workers are performing technical duties with regards to policy enforcement, encryption techniques, monitoring alerts, applying patches, scanning for vulnerabilities, and ensuring that new solutions or changes to solutions are managed securely. And to keep it managed, all levels within the organization must understand internal and external needs, ensure that resources are available and are competent, and set goals to track the health of the ISMS. And finally, react to corrective actions and look for continuous improvement activities. The ISMS is beyond just the IT activities. Cross-functional involvement is essential, not optional, for the success of an ISMS. This table provides a very good overview of how the ISMS may cut across the various roles within an organization. Please note, applicability of these functions is dependent on the nature of the business, the products, process, and customer needs. So, for example, Control A.5, the information security policies require all functions and users. It is key not only to write and issue a policy, but ensure it makes sense for your organization to comply with, and all users understand and acknowledge the part that they play. While Control A.10, cryptography, does not require all functions, but key ones for direction, resources, risk assessment, and acceptance based on the methods used. So if you are going to implement an ISMS, or maybe you're ready for certification, take a look to make sure all process owners are on board, involved, engaged, and own the process, including risk. So now let's switch gears and look at a typical audit agenda. Before we go to the audit agenda, we'll look at the ISO 27002, the implementation guideline for ISO 27001. ISO 27002 has detailed guidelines for readiness and double-checking your implementation. The picture on the left side shows the first page of Annex A in 27001 standard. The top picture on the right side is a zoomed-in view of the same. So from the picture on the left, you can see only a brief description of the control is listed in Annex A of ISO 27001. However, if you drill down into ISO 27002, there's much more detail to help with the implementation. On the bottom right is a picture of the first page of this code of practice, a new revision of which was published in February of this year. Now this flow shows a comparison of the contents with the example of Control A.5, Information Security Policies. The 27001 standard is on top left with just the requirement listed. But on the right side, 27002 implementation guidance describes what needs to be done to conform with the listed requirements. Now that there's a new revision of 27002 guidance document, it provides a one-to-one correspondence table between the previous and the current version. This will help you in implementing the updates to the ISO 27001 revision when it comes out at the end of this year. It is worth saying again that the Annex B of the new revision of ISO 27002 provides a table showing backwards compatibility with 27002 2013 version. Now we can go back to the discussion on the duration of audit. It depends on many factors, including the size, complexity, criticality, maturity of your program, the dependency on outsourcing, integration with other standards, and development activities. So the audit agenda summary shows the date on which the agenda is shared with the client, the client reference number and the name, and the locations that will be audited. The audit standard is listed, and the audit phase in the cycle, it can be an initial audit, surveillance audit 1, surveillance audit 2, or the recertification audit. The scope statement is verified. It goes on the printed certificate after a successful audit. And the SOA, the statement of applicability, version and date. The audit team is listed and the calendar dates are mentioned. For this example, the team will consist of 2 auditors, lead auditor and a co-auditor. And the audit criteria and the objectives are listed. The audit agenda is based on the total audit time, which is calculated using the head count, the complexity of the business, and the complexity of the IT processes. The total man days are divided among the auditors. In this example of a recertification audit, the calculated man days are 5, which are divided between the 2 auditors. So the agenda will be covered over 2.5 days over 2 separate audit paths. A typical agenda includes the time of the meeting, method of the meeting. It could be on-site, physical location, or it could be remote conference call. The process to be audited with the applicable standard clause or control reference. Typical audit day is 8 hours of audit time. At the end of the day, there is a summary of the day meeting, which includes the discussion of the findings, any remaining items for follow-up, and any schedule changes or constraints for the next day. Now this is the second day of the audit. See how the two auditors have their separate audit paths, and there's time allocated for auditor alignment at the end of the day. On the last day of the audit, we conclude with a closing meeting where a summary of the audit findings is presented. The next steps and actions are reviewed so that a path to issuance of the certificate is clear to all. Now let's take one more different viewpoint, and let's look at a couple of audit paths you may encounter in an ISMS audit. This audit path example number 1 begins as we review the statement of applicability that is required by organization under 6.1.3d. I'll follow a format of what audit questions may come up and what is the clause control reference. Here we may start by reviewing which policies the organization has defined under A.5.1.1. Next, a natural path is to review with HR the following. How does the organization define what and when resources are needed, which refers to 7.1? When hiring, how do you establish what competencies are needed? That's clause 7.2. Is this defined in a job description that a candidate must acknowledge or sign a job offer that contains the terms and conditions of employment? And this ties to Annex A Controls 7.1.2. And then based on position are the information security roles and responsibilities defined. That ties back to A.6.1.1. As part of the hiring process, how are applicants screened? That's required by A.7.1.1. Are there any compliance requirements based on the nature of the job, customer, or information classification? That would go into the report under A.18.1.1. Are there any NDAs, IP policies, acceptable use policy that have to be signed by the employee or the contractor? That would go into A.8.1.3 or 18.1.2. So once onboarded, is there a cybersecurity awareness training that needs to be completed prior to being given access to vital systems, including a disciplinary process for non-compliance of awareness? This goes in the report under A.7.2.2 and A.7.2.3. In addition to verifying the policy in the process, we'll select samples of onboarded users or offboarded users, depending on the clause, and then follow through and test through all of these requirements that they are being followed according to the client policy and process that they have written. So the verification will be against the standard as well as the policies and processes of the client. So now let's look at the interface to ITIL for on and offboard access or assets. So that's A.9.2.1 and A.9.2.2. We'll review approval of rights, removals, changes when people change positions. That's A.9.2.6. Review of asset approval and acceptance would be in Annex A 8.1.1, 8.1.2, and A 8.1.4. So on this slide, we went through various Annex A controls and tied those back to how the organization will implement and how the organization would be audited against it. Now this second audit path example illustrates the audit path details for employment. The standard has controls that address before, during, and after or change of employment. First, the auditor takes samples of new hires and terminations within the last 12 months and then tests to find if required steps were completed with respect to hiring, changes of jobs, or terminations. Starting with the onboarding and offboarding checklists and then validating those for the samples chosen. See the table in 2 for examples of the objective evidence needed for the samples. We'll take samples. There are names, titles, start date, and then completion of criminal background check, policy acknowledgement, security awareness training, signatures on NDA. And these are just a few examples. This is not a complete list, but just examples of how some of these controls would be audited. And the same goes for termination. What was the termination date when the device was retrieved and how the network access may have been removed. Now this next example illustrates the audit path for risk assessment using an example of the risk related to phishing attacks. First, the auditor will sample the risk register and to find if the risks related to phishing are considered. This path will lead to the risk mitigation controls that may have been applied, such as A.7.2.1, management responsibility to require all employees and contractors to follow information security policies and procedures. How is this communicated to the employees, and how is it checked upon or enforced? This path would then lead to A.7.2.2, information security training, sampling of training records, verification of 100% compliance, and sampling of escalation paths for those who fail to comply, which is A.7.2.3, a requirement about disciplinary process. Now, how does the compliance team prepare the top management for the top management interview? In order to keep the interview focused on ISMS, the compliance team may need to prepare the top management with sufficient data from the plan, do, check, act cycle. Of course, top executives carry many different responsibilities, and it is important for the auditor to keep the focus of this short interview on the governance of ISMS. It is valuable to hear from executives that they are involved in the continuous improvement process of information security for the organization. Now, we are constantly adding more information on DQS website. There's plenty of helpful information on this topic as well. Armed with a better understanding and knowledge of ISO 27001 and what to expect from a third-party audit, it is easy to chart a path of conformance with this standard. We looked at the important steps along the way in previous charts. There are many tools available to you to help with this journey. You can find them on DQS website. We can also help with gap assessments or pre-audits to determine the level of readiness. The visual here is just one example of PDCA quick self-assessment checklist that you can download directly from our website. How to connect with DQS. It is easy to connect with DQS for your certification needs. Feel free to reach out to Ravi Maywal, who is also on this call, for any guidance on how to get ISO certification for your organization.
All right. All right, guys. Sandeep, you're back. My camera's spinning, so it's trying. So you'll see my face here shortly. We did not get any questions during in the chat box during the session, so we'll open it up if you have any questions. So Sandeep, great job on the presentation, taking our previous day in the light of an ISO and drilling down, because you answered a lot of good questions that we get, especially in clients when we talk to them prior to their certification process, and definitely during that stage one audit. So really good content there. So open it up to questions. You know, um, did we cover some items that you didn't know before you walked in, or do you have any questions regarding the process? And if we don't see any questions, Sandeep, we'll go ahead and roll with those poll on comments or poll questions, and we'll see if that generates any additional questions. How's that sound?
That sounds good. Thank you, Laura. I truly appreciate your words and your help with this webinar. I'm going to start the polls over here in just a moment.
Okay. All right, guys. And while Sandeep is pulling that up, we got a lot of questions, a lot of interest on TISAX. Uh, we are holding our next webinar, which will be July 26th, which will be on TISAX. So we'll go through overall how the process works, how to get registered, what the audit process looks like, specifically spending time on the self-assessment, which is an actual requirement, kind of like internal audits for ISO 27, because that is self-assessment that your assessor will build off of. So join us on July 26th, and I think Sarah's going to put a plug in at the end and give you a link to that. But while Sandeep was bringing that up, I thought we'd share that with you,
It's
because I know
just
that was
spinning
of
for me.
interest. Yeah, exactly.
They
So
changed the interface and it's just not loading the
y-
polls. Give me one moment,
yeah,
please.
yeah, GoToMeeting has not been good since this last change. Thanks, Sarah, for posting that webinar registration. Much appreciated. So uh, go ahead and click that link if you'd like to join to that. So it's actually going to be really good. We've actually are adding additional TISAX auditors because we're seeing growth with our clients and growth with our global clients. So if you're a global company that needs TISAX, as well as maybe a US based company, we can service those needs as well, because we work with our DQS BIT accreditation sister company, as well as others, to kind of organize that. So, all right. Would it help if I shut my camera off, Sandeep? Would that help with the bandwidth, or you think it's on the go-to side?
It's probably on go-to side or maybe bandwidth on my side. I'm not sure, but that's a good suggestion. I'll try to switch off my camera and see
Yeah,
again.
yeah. Try that. And the poor people are stuck with my mug while you're doing that. So, any other questions, guys? Go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll answer them. Um, the helpful tools, one of the things that people that are getting prepared for always wants to know, when is the organization ready to seek that next step towards certification. And that little helpful tool, that quick assessment guide that Sandeep showed at the end, gives you a little radar chart, little bars to say, if you've answered these questions, then looks like you are prepared for it. So it's a good little quick to guide that can help you. So, all right, maybe oh, thanks, Ravi. So Ravi Maywell, who is our um, sales manager for our IT services. If you're looking for a quote, or reach out to us at the https colon backslash I should say // DQS usquote.com, and he'll be able to help you out. All right. Any luck, Mr. Sandeep?
I am not having luck launching these poll questions today.
Okay. Is Sarah on? Can she launch them? Does she have them there?
Sarah doesn't have visibility to the questions that I put in there, so
Okay.
we
Why
will
don't we go ahead
probably
and
have
read the questions? Why don't we go ahead and read the questions and see if we can just get people to answer in the chat box. Why don't you kind of read those out loud and we'll start from there.
That is a very good idea. Thank you so much. So the first
Mm-hmm.
poll question is a yes or no. So you can participate in the poll by typing a yes or a no for the first question, and I'll post it in the chat as well. The first question is asking about your familiarity with ISO 27002. Do you have, are you familiar with ISO 27002? And the reason of asking this question is to help guide the process of implementation of ISO 27001.
Okay. All right. We've got two yeses and a no, which is probably about what we saw in a couple months ago. So for those of you that are new to, oh, a couple more no's coming in. So yeah, so when you read the ISO 27001, when you look at the Annex A, there's just a brief description of the control. But as Sandeep showed in the webinar, you go to 27002, it gives you really good what they're looking for. And what we as auditors, we keep a copy of 27001 and 27002 with us during the audit, and we'll flip between those two. So rather than flying blind, like for example, on that A.5, it also lists the 11 or 12, what I would call main policies that you should consider. So another question is, when will the new 27002 be available for purchase? Sandeep, do you know when the ISO organization is
Yes,
releasing that? Do we have a release date?
thank you. Yes, so the 27002 has already been published in February of this year, but 27001 is still in the works. And to answer your question on these, it is slated to be published at the end of the year. They
Okay.
haven't given a specific date on it.
Okay. So probably in the next couple months.
You're right.
Okay. Great. Great
Going to the
question,
next
Jennifer.
question.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Laura. Going to the
Mhm.
next question. Really wanted the audience's feedback on the audit paths. If everybody found the slides on the audit path helpful to understand what to expect during an internal or external audit. And I'm
Great
posting it in the
question.
chat.
Great question. So yes or no, did you find it helpful? We got so far 2 yeses. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Mark. Yep. Jennifer, Paul, yes, yes. Similar to most audits. Yep, absolute, Jennifer. Absolutely it is. It's just the topics are slightly different. So if you're familiar with ISO 9001 or 14001, it's a harmonized program. So it follows those clauses 4 through 10, very similar. And it has if you look at it, those harmonized programs also have two key things. They're a process-based approach, and they are risk-based approach as well. All right, we have no no's, Mr. Sandeep, so great job there. That's a
Thank you,
100%er.
Laura.
You're welcome.
And then moving forward with the last poll question, we wanted to seek your feedback on what other topics would you be interested in for future webinars. So we have a TISAX webinar coming, so that's one possible answer. CMMC, ISO 27701, or more discussion on ISO 27001. You can type your responses in the chat, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if we look at, changes to 27, great question, Mark. That's great. Focusing a webinar probably third quarter when those are published, the changes to the two. Great one. A lot of people asked in the April timeframe on the TISAX. That's why we're doing that TISAX, because you're seeing a lot of you've got two things. If you got automotive or automotive suppliers, a lot of those OEMs, based on what the environment looks like out there, they're they're pushing for those implementations and pushing for many at the end of the year. It sinks in eventually through beating me over the head. That's a great comment, Jennifer. Not the beating over the head, but the repetition. The more people can get it, the more comfortable you feel with the information, the more confident you can help deliver that message to your leadership or other team members. So absolutely. And there's other. I think was it SCS, the TL supply chain,
That's
new.
true.
Yeah, so that one was coming up, and we're asking what's a driver in the market, and they say everybody's really focusing on the 27001. Um, and great, Jennifer, you're right. Just like when we're coming up through school, we hear it, we apply it, we hear it again, apply it. That repetition really kind of it sinks in. So that's great. And then Paul has a question on the you'd like to see more information on ISO 22301. So we'll write that down. Thank you, Paul, for that. Okay. All right. Any other in BCP? Um, so Sadie, did you have another poll question or not?
That's all I had for poll feedback. Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. And Paul said that 22301 is for business continuity planning.
Right.
Not a ton of organizations are requesting that right now because a lot and a lot of them cover that because if you look at Control A17 in Annex A, a lot of them are covering that, but we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in there. So thanks, Paul and Jennifer, asking for that. All right, no more Paul questions, sir?
No, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, let's ask if there's any other general questions that anybody'd like to post in the chat so that we can address for you. Remember, our time is your time. It's what you can do. All right, Ravi, good question here. Can you provide guidance on how much time is given to clients for an upgrade audit when the new revision of ISO 27001 is issued? So, Sandeep, I'll let you answer that one. You're a little closer to that one than I am.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, definitely. I would be very happy to answer that question. So just like the calculation of audit time that we covered during these charts, it has many factors. One is headcount, another one is the business complexity and IT complexity. So an upgrade would also be affected by all these factors. And the additional time required for the update could vary a lot. It could be as little as half a day, or it could be longer.
Okay. So it really depends on what do you call it, the current calculator, and we'll definitely be able to quote that for you to make it more
Certainly.
specific to your organization needs. So thank you, Ravi, for the question. Any other questions? These webinars, we do them on regarding what your guys' needs are. And if there's any kind of, new or trending, we do want to get a CMMC. That's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. I think they're now calling themselves the Cyber AB or Accreditation Board. That's part of that Department of Defense initiatives that what do you call it? That the federal government's still working on. I just saw town hall this morning, and they're still in the voluntary rules making process. So I think we're going to see more updates from them by the end of June, going into July. So we'll definitely keep you posted. We want to do a webinar on that because we have a lot of clients that also do business as part of their mainstream business with the federal government, have some contracts and have that applicable. So we'll keep you posted on that one as well. And Carol, she said, how are TISAX audit days calculated? How will I know how many audit days are needed for my organization? So very much similar to how we calculate for ISO 27001. It's based on needs and complexity. A slightly different calculator because I don't believe that TISAX is rigorous on the number of days. They're more important that you cover all the material. And it really is dependent on the scope statement. So when you go into the TISAX ENX portal, you have to register a scope statement, you have to register your location. So when you go to register that quotes a scope statement, you'll have to actually have some information from your clients, or your customers. So some customers may say you have to be a level 2 or a level 3. They may say prototypes in scope, data protections in scope. That information goes into those scope statements through that ANX portal, and then those get used to set up that calculator and do that calculation. Good question from, is it Wanda? When is the ISO 9001 scheduled to be updated? I am not sure. That is a very good question. Sandeep, do you know that question? If not, I can ask Mr. Chris James and we can get that back out to the group on that one.
Right, we will have to circle back on this one.
Yeah.
Usually ISO standards are revised every 7 years, but
Mm-hmm.
because of the pandemic, the revisions have been delayed. For example, ISO 27001, we are still using 2013 version, and in 2022, we are looking forward to a revision. So I'm not sure about the 9001 timeline.
Yeah, and Chris James is our sector director for quality. He covers that. So we'll definitely get that out to the group. And we can also go to the ISO website and they'll give you an update on where they're published. So, all right. Other questions while you've got us on the screen? I don't know about you guys, but all the chat's in pink for me. So, and it looks like everybody's doing it to organizer. I did that earlier because I was pinging everybody to let them know, and I was only defaulting to the organizer, and then I had to switch it to everyone. So, but the bright pink's good color. It's catch your attention. Okay. All right. Always look forward to the presentations from DQS. Thank you. Thank you so much. We can only do to the organizer or presenter. Thank you, Jennifer, for letting us know that. Did not know that you guys didn't have the option. Well, that's okay. I'm reading every one of them off, so I have not missed any, I don't think. So hopefully you guys are not missing any of the good dialogue going on between the groups. So, all right, Dan, and thank you. We got a great job. So thanks, Sandeep. You did an awesome job preparing that. And again, guys, please join us if it's applicable for you or someone in your organization. Copies of the slides to reference back. I will let Sarah handle that. She handles all that media stuff for us. But I know the recording will be posted as well. And then again, TISEX coming up July 26th. One of the other things that we'll be working on is we're bringing out a DQS Academy. So we're going to be offering some additional what we call trainings and learnings and stuff like that. Because a lot of times people want to hear from the experts of what to expect. And so there's some news coming out on that as we come up. So. All right, with that, it is 11:43 Eastern Time, my time, Mr. Sandeep. So unless there's any other questions from the group, I'd like to thank everybody. Sandeep, if you have any closing comments, turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Laura. Truly appreciate your guidance and support in this, and I thank all the participants for taking the time to join and making this webinar a success. Truly appreciate your comments and the interaction through the webinar.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.